Most of the justices did seem a bit skeptical of the argument that blanket immunity would apply to a former president, that the whole idea was probably stunk to high heaven. And even Justice Amy Christian Barrett zeroed in on what type of behavior Trump's lawyers maintain were private acts or official acts. And this is a part that is beyond me. One of many parts. There's so many moving parts to Trump's criminality. It is impossible for me, sitting here in the Daniel Scapin studio with one computer, one iPad, one roadcaster, and one microphone, to access all the information that has come out over the past, what's it been, folks? 9 goddamn years. Can you believe that? About the lies and deception and criminal activity of Trump where it concerns the government of the United States. I don't give a fuck if he robs banks on his lunch breaks. I expect that the police in whatever jurisdiction he robs the banks will arrest him and try him. What I care about is the damage this rancid bastard has done, not just to this country, but to the institutions that are absolutely necessary for the survival of this country. And he continues to do it with impunity, it seems. He just keeps fucking doing it. While we sit and listen to learned, educated, well-versed in constitutional law, justices of the Supreme Court, I'm not talking about the liberals, justices of the Supreme Court trying to bite through and parse and claw at every little goddamn comma and phrase they can come up with to justify this monster's actions. And that leaves me in a pretty emotional state. Really? Yes, it does. Now, Sammy the Fish Alito, who just turns my stomach, just looking at his hideous face and listening to that sound to his voice, his questions seem to imply that he knows what the answer is because he's a good, devout, absolutely ultra-conservative Catholic, and he knows the answers. That sound to his voice while he questioned Michael Dreeben, who was representing Jack Smith's, the special prosecutor. And the Fish was asking whether the president is in a different position than most individuals, having to make a variety of critical, high-pressure decisions. And before I tell you what Dreeben said, see, that's a question. Oh boy, this is where I show my ignorance and my volatility and how I would not be qualified to do anything except to sit here in the Daniel Scapin studio and make ridiculous commentary. Because had I been asked that question, or had it been pointed out to me that the president has to make a variety of critical high-pressure decisions, my answer would be, and I would scream it, shriek it probably, what the fuck does that have to do with breaking the law? He's making decisions to suggest that the Electoral College be inverted from what it really was saying in the 2020 election? Is that what Sammy the Fish is asking? That's one of the high-pressure decisions, whether or not Trump should commit further acts of criminal behavior against the Constitution? What the fuck, Sammy? Now, Michael Dreeben, who represents the government in this, represents special prosecutor. He said, quote, making a mistake is not what lands you in a criminal prosecution. Because Sammy the Fish had said, what if the president makes a mistake? Does that mean he's going to be prosecuted? And Dreeben comes back with the obvious answer. I was waiting for him to say, hey, you dumb bastard, making a mistake is not what lands you in a criminal prosecution. Evidence, grand jury indictments, investigations, and you may be found not guilty. But what lands you in the prosecution supposedly, for the most part, follows the rule of law. Not always, I understand. But Dreeben pointed out the obvious here, that the allegations against this orange bastard have to do with lengthy criminal conspiracy and interference with the transfer of power. And also, I think he pointed this out, that there have been 60 different courts who have ruled against Trump as the orange son of a bitch tried to slime his way out of taking responsibility for his action. And I can't help but wonder if the Supreme Court is aware, and God knows they better be, that every single court has turned down his challenges to the 2020 election as being bullshit or meritless, or why are you even in my court? The Supreme Court justices know this, and yet they treat the arguments being presented by his attorney with just enough dignity, with just enough respect to make it sound as though Trump's attorney has a reason for being there other than trying to weasel the bastard out once again. Once again. And Dreeben pointed out that the President of the United States has no function in the certification of a presidential election. How many times have we been told that? Dreeben said this, quote, "The President doesn't have any official role in that proceeding. So it's difficult to understand why there could be a serious constitutional question on whether the President could be prosecuted for the type of behavior that he encouraged, led, and provoked, and invoked." But Sammy the Fish said, quote, "This case will have effects that go far beyond this prosecution." Well, no shit, you asshole. Of course it will. So what are you going to say, Fish? Sounds to me like what you're going to say is that Trump has immunity. That's how I would interpret the way you were questioning both sides, as you would put it, in this argument, in this presentation. I mean, these justices, the Christian Nazis on the Supreme Court, and there are 5 of them, possibly 6. To my uneducated, in the law ears, it seems to me, I should say, that what the justices are trying to do is to find any little peg on which they can hang the innocence of Donald Trump, that he was only acting in the capacity of the Savior, of Jesus Christ's brother, of the answer to all the ills in this country and on the globe. The Messiah has returned. Well, the case, of course, is putting an awful lot of additional, not that they don't already have a ton of it, additional scrutiny on this court, which has that 6-3 supermajority of Christian fascists, 3 of which Trump appointed, and a 4th one is married to this bitch co-conspirator Ginny Thomas, who was actively involved in the overthrow of the government. Did Uncle Clarence recuse himself and say, look, my old lady, my white wife, who is, I just can't control the bitch, but listen, I'm out of here. I'm going to recuse myself because she's a real case. And I certainly want this Supreme Court to act above and beyond even the hint of being prejudiced in favor of Donald Trump. Did Uncle Clarence do that? Are you fucking kidding me? The Supreme Court justices, of course, prior to the hearing this morning, have come under criticism for the delay in taking up this appeal of what occurred in Chutkan's courtroom, and then the appellate court in D.C. upheld the decision by Judge Chutkan. And then Trump, of course, being the kind of rat that he is, more delay, went to the Supreme Court back in February. This is almost May. And Jack Smith had asked the court, please expedite this, please take this right away. And they more or less said to Jack Smith, fuck you, we're not going to do that. So the justices of the Supreme Court, I should say, has come under criticism for the delay in taking up Trump's case here. And that in itself is a victory for this delay rat, Donald Trump. This is his whole life. Delay, delay, delay. I wonder if he's going to try to convince Mr. Death when Mr. Death comes with his hooded cape and says to Trump, "It's your time, mofo." I wonder if Trump is going to say, "Hey, can I get a 10-day delay here? Can I get a 2? Now, wait a minute. Let me appeal before. Where do I go to appeal my own death? Son of a bitch." So back in February, the court announced it would hear the case, and at the time it said it would examine, quote, whether and if so, to what extent does a former president enjoy presidential immunity from criminal prosecution for conduct alleged to have involved official acts during his tenure in office, end quote. So that decision immediately put the whole prospect of a pre-election trial of this criminal son of a bitch in jeopardy. And I think the decision that's going to come out of the mouths of these 6 Christian fascists, as soon as it does come out of their collective mouth, is going to upend the whole idea of Trump not being immune for crimes he's committed. That he is, in fact, immune. I hope I'm wrong. I tend not to make political predictions, certainly not Supreme Court justice opinions based on listening to the questions from those justices. But I'll tell you what, I learned my lesson with the overturning of Roe v. Wade, with the denial of the petition or the case that said he shouldn't be allowed to run because of his behavior in trying to overthrow the government. And when you listen closely now to the questions, you can pretty well get an idea of what the ultimate decision is going to be. You may not get the exact breakdown. But in this particular case, from what I could determine from listening, it's going to be in favor of Trump. It's either going to be 6-3 or it's going to be 5-4. But I think it's going to be in favor of Trump. Now, the question is, to what degree will it be in favor? If this Supreme Court says that Chutkan's court can continue the prosecution of this son of a bitch for illegal acts, private acts, then the case will continue. And as far as presidential acts or official acts, no decision will be made on those acts until further review by the Supreme Court, by the Congress, by whomever. So it may be a split decision here. But if the case against this rotten Nazi son of a bitch doesn't continue in Chutkan's courtroom, the whole election interference thing, the January 6th, 2001, what he did, if that is derailed, or if the Supreme Court says, well, that was an official act and he's immune, then I don't think it's hyperbole to say that this democratic republic has finally crumbled. Now, the only caveat to that would be unless Trump is defeated in November. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. The Progressive Voices Network brings you commercial-free commentary from today's leading progressive radio hosts and pundits, like me, Mike Malloy, 24 hours a day. I'm not your typical old guy from the 80s or the 90s talk radio host, and Progressive Voices is not your typical talk radio network. It's a listener-supported nonprofit with no corporate control whatsoever over our broadcast. So hosts like me, Mike Malloy, are free to rant and scream and carry on about whatever we like. We're often controversial, but we're never boring. Weeknights, 9 p.m. in the East, 6 p.m. in the West on the Progressive Voices Network. Always progressive, always on. I'm Mike Malloy. Keep it lit.